We now present For the Record.
What letter grade does the state budget get on education funding? We sit down with the MMSD superintendent to find out. Plus, we press him for answers on allegations that he directed the misuse of COVID funds during his time in the St. Paul School District. Welcome to For the Record. I'm Will Keneally. We'll get to state politics in a second, but we start this week in Washington, where the House of Representatives gave final approval for a rescission bill that claws back roughly $9 billion in funding from programs like the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and foreign aid. Now, on Thursday, Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson spoke ahead of that House vote. Now, the Republican has been a staunch supporter of cutting government waste and reducing the federal debt.
I have to believe there's literally hundreds of billions of dollars and 2,600 programs, hundreds of programs that if you completely eliminated them, nobody would even notice, except for the grifters who are sucking down the waste, fraud, and abuse. So, listen, this is the least we can do. It's a little depressing that it was difficult to get the $9 billion, but no, if somebody thinks that something ought to be cut from the federal government, I'll probably support it.
And in Washington, the U.S. Justice Department announced that it would ask a federal court to unseal grand jury transcripts in the Jeffrey Epstein case. Now, this comes after criticism against the Trump administration over its handling of the so-called Epstein files. And for more on this, we are joined by CBS News national correspondent Scott MacFarlane, and thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, good to be here, Will.
So I first want to start with this idea. We're looking at the Epstein list here, and I feel like we've seen nationally, certainly, fractures among MAGA conservatives over this. I was wondering if you could provide us a little bit of the latest and how this is salient to voters.
There's going to be, at some point, either before the weekends or very early next week, this legal challenge submitted by the U.S. Department of Justice trying to get a judge to unseal some grand jury transcripts back in the old investigation of Jeffrey Epstein from more than 6 years ago. The president asked the Department of Justice to do it, and they're poised to do it. But it's not clear what that's going to yield. Not likely to yield any new exhibits or photos or names or videos. It may produce just bare bones information that is unsatisfying to the Trump supporters who've been seeking more information on the Epstein case. And what's more, it's going to take some time. These court challenges could take months to go by.
Now, we're also looking ahead to next fall. Already hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent here in Wisconsin on our gubernatorial race heading into those midterms. We're more than a year out already. How are we looking nationally? Kind of as a snapshot in time, what's the national discourse around next fall's midterms?
Well, they're clearly pivotal to President Trump. He has a Democratic U.S. House or Democratic Senate, and he's going to have near zero ability to pass some laws that he wants to get passed. They're going to be a bulwark against him. What's more, they could investigate him. If Democrats control the House or the Senate, they have subpoena power. They have the ability to call a hearing on anything at any time and call witnesses. So it's a big problem for the president should he lose one of those two chambers. Democrats have the wind at their back. Traditionally, a president in his first midterm, or in this case in his second midterm, has some momentum against him. That being said, you got to watch out for what's going to happen in the coming weeks with states like Texas or California redrawing some of their maps, trying to protect incumbents or protect Republicans, protect Democrats. It could change the math and make next November even more interesting.
Scott MacFarlane, thanks so much. And back in Madison, a blistering report into the Madison election snafu was approved by the board that oversees Wisconsin elections. The Wisconsin Elections Commission voted to approve that report, which concluded that the City of Madison staff failed to follow proper protocol when transferring ballots during last November's election. Now, in the end, 193 Madison voters did not get their ballots counted due to that error. Now, that wasn't enough to sway the results of the election, but the commission hoped that it would serve as a lesson for other Wisconsin communities.
We had 193 people whose votes weren't counted, and I think we both felt strongly as we went through this that these are mistakes that could have been avoided, and it was more than just simple oversight.
Turning to next fall's elections, which seem fast approaching, and the continued speculation of whether Governor Evers will run for a third term, fulfilling that three-term Tony prophecy that he teased 2 years ago at the State Democratic Party convention. Now, Governor Evers has told reporters that he planned to make a decision after signing the state budget. Now, when we caught up with him in Beloit this week, he offered few details on when he might make that decision.
Can you reveal your plans for re-election?
I can.
And will those decisions impact future plans for your agenda?
Well, of course they will. If I decide not to run, I'm not going to have as much influence as I do now. But it'll happen. I'll be making that decision in the near future, very near future.
And just this week, we got in new fundraising numbers from all state candidates, including Governor Evers. Now, Governor Evers raised a little more than $750,000 in the first half of this year. Now, that's less than what he raised 4 years ago, when he pulled in more than $5 million. But according to a WisPolitics.com tally, this number includes some larger donors that he hasn't tapped yet in this year, including $1 million from the state Democratic Party. Now, for more on the state of the governor's race, we're joined by Director of the Elections Research Center at UW-Madison, Barry Burden. Now, I first want to get a sense of how early these gubernatorial cycles usually start.
This is a pretty typical time of year for candidates to be getting into the race. June, July, August, and into the fall has been pretty common in the last few gubernatorial cycles. There are some exceptions, like Tim Michels entering the race very late when he ran against Evers last time around. But this is sort of when you expect candidates to make decisions, about a year and a half out from the election. What is unusual is the amount of spending that's happening from one candidate in particular. That we've not seen before.
So why do they need that much time? Is it for like fundraising, for example, just to reach voters this early?
For some candidates, it's about making themselves familiar to the electorate. These are mostly unknown political figures. Bill Berrien has not held elective office. His Republican opponent holds office in Waukesha, would be familiar to voters there, but not in the rest of the state. We've seen other candidates kind of build their name ID over time. They spend months traveling the state, running ads, doing interviews, anything they can really to publicize themselves and make themselves be known to voters so they can be credible candidates. Also, fundraising is going to take some time, especially for candidates who need to do it the old-fashioned way by going to fundraisers and holding events. Tony Evers, or whoever the Democratic nominee would be, is likely to have tens of millions of dollars. We've really seen an escalation of spending in Wisconsin that is now requiring candidates to raise big sums, and that can take a while.
Now, as you talked about one of these candidates, Bill Berrien, he's already dropped $400,000 on an ad buy for this race already. How much is that $400,000 figure right now?
$400,000 is a lot at this point. I don't think we've ever seen a candidate running ads this early, paid ads in a way. There's certainly videos that are released online that are put on websites and are shared on social media, and they hope that the free media will pick those up and give them some circulation. But to spend close to $500,000 on paid advertising in the summer, a year before the primary really is new, it's laying down a gauntlet to say, hey, I'm a formidable candidate. I can buy some name identification by running ads and getting attention. Even the fact that he's buying ads is creating news stories and the conversations like we're having here. So it has a kind of spillover effect. We don't know what the upper limit of his self-funding will be, and he's been coy about that. I will say Republicans have run now, in the last few election cycles, a few self-funders, self-made business people. I think Ron Johnson was really the first of those in that model. But Eric Hovde and Tim Michels and others, and they've had mixed success with that pattern of candidates funding some of the early campaign themselves, maybe the bulk of the campaign in Michels' case, and then doing some regular fundraising on top of that. So Berrien will have to figure out just how much of his own funds he wants to put in versus a kind of traditional fundraising model.
On the other side, we have fundraising numbers from Governor Evers at around $750,000. Is that a healthy number for where Evers would want to be right now?
It doesn't look like a healthy number. It looks sort of anemic for a sitting governor who would be unchallenged in his primary if he were to run. It's well below what he raised 4 years ago. That was several $1 million. This is not even $1 million. So there's fundraising happening, which is not true for all of the candidates who might be statewide next year. But it's a slow pace. He will need to pick that up. Now, Evers does have a record of being a good fundraiser. He raised tens of millions of dollars 4 years ago, outraised his opponent, who was self-funding part of the campaign. So I think it can be turned on pretty quickly. But so far, he doesn't look like a candidate who's actively running. And we'll just have to see whether that kicks into motion or not.
Barry Burden, thank you. When we come back, our expansive one-on-one sit-down with Madison School Superintendent Joe Gothard. We'll be right back with more For the Record right after this. Welcome back to For the Record. With the state budget signed into law earlier this month, many educators were frustrated by the lack of school funding secured by the Democratic governor, who used to be a school teacher himself. Now, we asked Governor Evers about those concerns as we traveled with him in Beloit earlier this week.
Well, I don't believe, obviously, they believe what they want to believe. But at the end of the day, we put a whole bunch of money into what was asked of us, and that was to put it into special education so that they don't have to use their general fund to support special education. So we'll continue. I mean, am I satisfied with the results? No. But, you know, as we move forward, we're going to have to make sure that our schools are appropriately funded.
Now, that state funding will have an impact on local districts like the Madison Metropolitan School District. And for more on that, we sat down with Madison School Superintendent Joe Gothard. So we're just coming off of the state budget cycle. There's some funding for some K-12 programs, so to speak. But I know the state budget came in a little bit short for that general school aid. Educator, I kind of want to ask, how'd you grade this state budget?
Yeah, I think a C would be where I'd start with. I mean, meaning that there was some relief and some support that was given to public schools, and there's a lot to be left, a lot to be desired.
Yeah, I know K-12 education did get some special education funding, largely in that high cost, but also a little bit for that general special education funding. I know districts like Madison had asked for funding at around 90%, but the budget came in short of that. What's the difference? What would we have gotten at that 90% level?
At the 90%, we would have seen perhaps $60 million in additional funding that would have gone to cover the reimbursement that right now we take general funds to cover that cost. At 42 and 45%, we'll see somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 million, 12 million, and again, those are some certain numbers, meaning that that number is solid, and even if our need goes up, the percentage doesn't adjust as it would with a sum sufficient.
What does that mean for local taxpayers? We've heard kind of this rhetoric that, you know, if it's not coming from the state, we'll just have to go back to local property taxes for some of this funding.
Yeah, and this is the difficulty with trying to have this discussion with 421 districts, because we're all different. For example, there's a district in this state that has 6,400 students in a city of 27,000 people. Madison, 280,000 people and 26,000 students. That first district I mentioned receives more state aid than Madison does. They receive 50 million. The Madison Metropolitan School District receives 49 million. That means that 57% of that district's costs come from state aid. In Madison, 10.7% of our costs come from state aid. So we have to go to our taxpayers to make up that difference. You know, that 10% doesn't go very far. So that's why we've had to continue to go to referendum for our operational, resources.
Is that the kind of thing where you would go to the Capitol and try and lobby the lawmakers? How have those discussions been?
Well, it's a very complex, I should say, and complicated formula. And I think it bears us to take a look at it and find, how is this working for all districts that are, and many, unlike Madison, aren't able to pass a referendum. So I'm not just speaking for MMSD, I'm really speaking for the whole state in terms of what districts need to not just keep the doors open, but to deliver to children and to families what they want from public education. So I think that, the advocacy that we have to do is just making sure that our legislators know and understand how their decisions are impacting each individual district, their constituents, and to try to provide them the best information possible and make sure that they understand that when we don't get some sufficient funding and when we don't get 60% or 90%, this is the impact. Had MMSD not passed a referendum for $100 million, 30 million of which we got this year, we would be reducing by $20 million right now, based on the outcome of the state budget, in which we're seeing negative state aid of $12 million.
Yeah, so I was going to ask too, we saw voters approve those referenda both on the Capitol and operating sides. What kind of impact will that have in the classrooms that we could see in a couple of months here?
Well, I think for operations now, we're just talking about, our core function of, 75% of staff salaries and benefits, and, the programming and the support from transportation to any number of services that we provide our students. We're certainly looking to continue that, but we're also, continuing to prioritize smaller class sizes at the K through 2 level, for example. That takes an investment in order for us to do that. We're looking at adopting new curricula to make sure that we're, staying both ahead and with what we know now about the science of reading. We're making sure that we have the supports in place so the children are maximizing that opportunity.
When we come back, more from our sit-down with MMSD Superintendent Joe Gothard, including his response to allegations that he directed the misuse of COVID funds during his time at the St. Paul School District in Minnesota. We'll be right back with more For the Record right after this. Welcome back to For the Record. We pick up our conversation with Madison School Superintendent Joe Gothard. Here's more. So we're talking a little bit off air about kind of the excitement stuff that you've been working on over the summer that we'll see roll out this school year. Can you describe that a little bit?
Well, we started back in the middle of this past school year, beginning the new strategic plan. So we were able to conduct a great series of meetings with a community stakeholder group. The Board of Education approved on June 23rd the mission, vision, and guiding commitments for how we're going to guide our work. They're still working on our final student outcomes that we want to look and hold ourselves accountable to for that plan. But we look forward to organizing ourselves this year and coming up with some specific strategies that the community can expect and that our students and staff can work towards and helping our district improve.
We've seen certainly a bunch of changes to the federal Department of Education. If we see any more changes or a dismantling of that department where a lot of that focus will then shift more to the states and then the local districts, what would that look like for Madison?
I'm not sure, and I don't know that even the decision makers are sure. So I think that with at least what I've been told, what I can track and understand is if the Department of Education is no more, then states will have more responsibility to receive and distribute funds. The concern I have is, will there be funds for the states to receive? Is this the thing where the department goes and so too does the funding that the department once had to give to states? A lot of our federal funds are reimbursable, meaning that we provide the services and then we tell the state what services we provided and then we get a reimbursement from that allotment. So I would imagine that some sort of system like that will continue. It might have to be larger at states. Imagine they're now responsible for far more funds and making sure that there's accountability there with the LEAs, the local educational agencies. But a lot waits to be seen. Will the funding even be there, I think, is the first question. The state will build the system. They've shared that with us.
I was going to ask too, and a lot of what ifs, so I don't want you to necessarily peer into the crystal ball, but would Wisconsin be a state that could kind of step up in that regard?
I'm really not sure. It's the only state I'm in right now, so I will have a chance to connect with some national peers in the near future to learn what's happening in their jurisdictions. But again, all the states are different. Some state heads of public instruction are appointed, some are elected. So there's a lot of different configurations in terms of how this might look state to state. And we've seen that right now with things like banning books. You look around the country and look at the different discourse taking place. This is no different than that. Each state is going to have its politics, both at the state level and, of course, the local levels.
Yeah. I do want to turn briefly to the St. Paul stuff. We'd seen coming out of that district allegations of misspent COVID funds. I didn't know if you wanted to address that at all, assuage any concerns of folks who might be down here in Madison.
Yeah, in the previous district, there's a lawsuit that is being investigated right now that's going through the process of my former employer. And I'll cooperate with them any way that I can to make sure that they have the information that they need to proceed there, but I am not able to comment on, number one, I wouldn't comment on active litigation, but I certainly don't have the day-to-day what's taking place with that right now.
Yeah. When we see Madison go to referendum, though, is there any way that you want to assuage the concerns that the Madison funds are being well spent, getting exactly where they need to be?
We're doing a great job of, well, one, We have a incredible finance staff. We have regular updates at our Board of Education meeting. All of our documents are public documents. We have an audit that has come back without any modified comments or modified opinions on it. So I really feel good about that. In fact, we are highest bond rating ever for the sale of bonds for our building construction. So we're in a really good position. Moving forward, when the community hears $507 million for buildings, that's a large sum of money. We'll have regular ongoing reports that are public. They go before our board and then they go on our website. So our community can see exactly how we're tracking our project budgets on each one of our building projects so that they can see that this is what we said we were going to do and this is how we're making progress towards those goals.
Our conversation there with Madison School Superintendent Joe Gothard. When we come back, what does the governor's schedule look like? We'll have more For the Record right after this. Welcome back to For the Record. Now, it's that old Dolly Parton saying, working 9 to 5, but what does that look like for the Wisconsin governor? An analysis by WisPolitics.com of the governor's calendars from last year showed that the average time that his day started, 8:18 a.m. Now, the governor wrapped up his day on average by 5:27 p.m. All right, now it's time for me to wrap up this show, obviously. A quick reminder that you can watch full episodes of the show as well as expanded interviews on our website at channel3000.com under the For the Record tab. That does it for us this week. I'm Will Keneally. Have a great rest of your weekend.
This has been For the Record.